But let's talk about the body burden. Is it the emotional burden that we all carry? Is it the excess weight that people carry? What is that body burden? So one day when I had time, I sat down and I went to the EMU library online, the database, and I typed in the 2 words, body burden. And much to my surprise, 420,000 research papers were at my fingertips.
She's taking a really complex topic and breaking it down into layman terms for everybody else.
I really think this should be taught in a high school class as a mandatory class because this affects everyone.
I was expecting, a great big glass of information. I got hit with a fire hose.
So I asked my physician, my mentor, my friend, Dr. Lev Linkner, if he would order the Genova Diagnostics test for me. It was a very pricey test, but for some reason I just had to know. I had to know. Now, to me, the results were startling. Here is a woman that I was 60 years old at the time that had been eating organic since 1978 when I met Dr. Eugene Watkins. Not only was I eating organic, but I was using what I thought were the safest personal care products. But after 4 decades of being extremely careful, for my levels to be in the 95th percentile on one chemical, the 80th percentile on another chemical, what that means is out of 100 people, only 5 people had levels greater than I had in my body. Where were these chemicals coming from?
It was fascinating, years of research that we could really use. There's no escaping all these toxins everywhere that we're not even paying attention to. Some of them we get, but we don't see it all. And then what to do about it, because you feel helpless. She gives you tools of what to do.
And I came to understand how we are exposed and the health consequences that are possible when we are exposed. And the more I read, the more concerned I became for this millennial generation and their children and their grandchildren and the hardships that they will face. I wondered, would anybody be interested in what I know? Would anybody be interested in learning about this? I think they were. I wrote a book.
The other interesting thing I noticed, as with Cindy and several other practitioners that I've followed, is they've all had their own battle with health issues, and it seems to be what triggers them away from the traditional world into thinking a little deeper about health and health-related issues.
The World Health Organization estimates that environmental factors are responsible or contribute to nearly 13% of the deaths worldwide. And yet, environmental chemicals are rarely mentioned in initiatives to combat chronic disease. The different chemicals in our body all have different health effects. When we have continuous exposure to these chemicals on a daily basis, it results in a type of slurry in our body, again with these additive and synergistic effects. But there are other complications to research as well. We have to consider in that research, and they don't always, they should consider the health of the person's detoxification organs. How well does it work? Can that individual detox very efficiently, or are their detoxification systems sluggish? To determine prior to the research the level of exposure, the frequency of exposure, the duration of the exposure, and the timing. The timing is so important. Over 10 years ago, a major study was done that looked at the cord blood of newborn infants, and they found an average of 287 toxicants being passed on to this developing infant, and that studies of breast milk and meconium, that first stool of the baby, also reveals this passage of toxicants on to a developing baby, and that many of these chemicals resist elimination, and they persist in human tissue, and they bioaccumulate much like they do in our environment.
I've always believed and known that there are a lot of toxins and there's things in our environment we have to be cautious of. So it's very timely. It is so hidden. It's not spoken about and is really important for people to hear.
I mean, most people that I know are very concerned, and people are concerned, but what's really being done about it? Hear it, see it. I think it's just, you have to drive it into people's minds every day until something changes.
A number of these compounds are going to take a long period of time before the ill effects are even observed. And so the impact then won't be realized yet for many more years. Some of the changes may extend beyond the generation initially exposed. Extend beyond. The Pediatric Academic Society has affirmed that the functioning of the current generation can even be impacted by low-level exposure. Think about that. When I was born in 1953, many of these chemicals were not pervasive in our environment.
I think it's really important for any millennial to see this information. There was enough information to kind of scare the dickens out of you, but at the same time, she gave you the steps to take to remove the toxins from your body and really learn how to change your lifestyle over time. It's too overwhelming to do all at once.
Prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and diabetes are absolutely on the rise. Of the 85,000 chemicals we now have in our world that have been manufactured over the past 4 or 5 decades, little toxicology information really exists on these. And in defense, it isn't possible to expose a subject in a clinical trial to a potentially harmful substance. So that's another complication to the research. We have to have a highly funded, highly educated, very well-staffed Environmental Protection Agency, because this stuff isn't going to go away on its own. PCBs are persistent. PCB number 153 on the seafloor, its half-life is 100 years. Now the half-life is the amount of time required for 50% of a compound to degrade. So we go, okay, it's 100 years on the seafloor. That means in another 100 years, it'll be gone. Not true. Each of these chemicals has its own degradation. So in the case of DDT, it takes 5 half-lives for that compound to degrade to 97%. So these are persistent chemicals.
I tend to eat healthy and I pay attention to what's on there, but it's the hidden things that you don't even know. A huge shock.
Health has been an issue, a concern of mine for 40 years. And when I started hearing about some of the stuff that I could learn from her, I realized that there was a lot more that I could be watching out for.
The next group of chemicals are VOCs. These are not stored in our body, but because we are regularly exposed on a daily basis, they show up in a body burden study. They call it BTEXS. Those are the 5 most common. I was in the 80th percentile on benzene and the 80th percentile on styrene. Where was I getting this from? You really have to stop and think when you have this test and you look at it, where am I getting these chemicals? Think of what someone's body burden would show that isn't being careful, that isn't watchful of everything that they're eating or drinking. BPA. The annual worldwide production of BPA in 2007 was 5.5 billion pounds. That was 2007, 5.5 billion pounds. 4 years later, that number was 12 billion pounds of BPA being manufactured. In 2007 alone, 4 million pounds of BPA was released into our air, our water, and onto our land. BPA is used in the manufacturing of plastics. So while we don't have much control over many of the things on this list, what you do have control over are those plastic water bottles. If you take nothing away from this lecture tonight, it's get rid of your water bottles, those plastic water bottles. Do you know that the Natural Resources Defense Council did a study on bottled water, and they found 25% of the water that you are drinking is tap water. Some of it treated and some of it not. So not only are you buying tap water in a bottle, but now you're going to be drinking these chemicals. How? Heat and storage time enhance the migration of these plastics chemicals into the water that you are drinking. And I said plastics. There are more than one chemical used to make that water bottle. All those chemicals, an easy fix, get rid of your plastic bottles.
Stop blowing this off. It really is serious stuff. And if you want to live a longer and healthier life, pay attention. And since I have a lot of millennials in my life, children, and now a grandchild, please pay attention.
A lot of it seemed like it was something that could have a big negative impact on my life and those who I care about if we don't take some sort of action. If I didn't plan on taking any sort of action, I wouldn't have bought the book.
The different chemicals in our body all have different health effects. A number of these compounds are going to take a long period of time before the ill effects are even observed. And so the impact then won't be realized yet for many more years. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a step back, we're going to do a little deep breathing, and I'm going to give you some tools. I'm going to give you some ways that you can avoid these toxicants, as well as give you information on detoxification. All right, so we're going to go through this now, because there are things that you can control. At this point, you're thinking, oh my gosh, what's the use? But there are things that you can control. But we're going to focus on what goes in our mouth, on our skin, and the air that we breathe, sort of, right? I mean, we have somewhat control over that. So let's look at these action steps. Getting rid of our plastic bottles, watching our air quality, and finally, detoxing. We have to detox. It's not just a, oh, I'm a hippie, I'm going to detox anymore. It's mandatory. We really have to detoxify. How we do that is with plants, with plant foods, whether it's fruits or vegetables or legumes, if it's an herbal medicine or an essential oil. Plants are what detoxify the body. We need to support our gut. We have to make sure that our digestive system and our elimination system is working perfectly. We can dry brush our skin, we can sweat, we can do saunas. You might want to do a little bit of fasting, maybe you want to do some vegetable juicing, even colonics, it doesn't matter. Herbs, essential oils, and plant foods.
So many handy, useful things that I could apply in my life, and then I'm going to want to jump on her Twitter or her Instagram and get those little daily tidbits on what I can learn step by step, since there's so much information. I was so enthusiastic about it, I bought a book from my pastor too.
Inform, inform, inform. I think people know that plastic's bad, but it goes beyond, not purchasing water bottles. The book, I'm sure, will help me. It'll be a nice reference to kind of thumb through. If I can kind of spread it around my circle, then that's what, it served its purpose.
But I also want you to share this information, especially with children or young people of childbearing age. Those people on a weight loss program, those with unresolved medical issues, they just can't get to the root of this medical problem. They just don't know what's causing it. Talk to them and emphasize them the importance of not only avoiding the toxicants as much as possible, but teaching them about detoxification. The field of environmental medicine is still in its infancy. It is a branch of Western medicine, but it's brand new. So your education begins tonight. Your self-education begins tonight, because you might not hear this anywhere else. And I'm going to give you some tools. I'm going to give you some ways that you can avoid these toxicants, as well as give you information on detoxification.
I think she's going to make a difference. I really do. I think she's going to make a difference in people's lives. She has for years. And so that's a legacy for her. Make me cry. Yeah, it's something she should be really proud of.